Welcome. This is the Drupal usability meeting for April 12th, 2024. I'm Benji Fisher moderating, and also present are Ralph Kohler, who's sharing his screen, and we'll start off the discussion. And Aaron McHale, Quinn, Simo Helston, Scott, and Thomas Howell. Go ahead, Ralph.
Thanks, Benji. First issue we're taking a look at today is at View tab and standard template for blog content is issue number 3342998. That issue basically is adding the option to view a View tab for blogs. So basically, you have the setting that is added with that patch. Microcopy wise, they've oriented towards the media settings, which has standalone media URL, allow users to access media items at media -id. And over here, you have now a standalone blog content URL, allow users to access content blogs at admin content blog ID. If you, without that, everybody knows, but if you activate it, basically, and if you go to blogs and you go, then you get the preview for the blog and you can switch over. So it's basically behaving like notes that way. The reason why Lee Rowland added the needs usability review was a concern of mine, because in regards of where the setting is actually placed within configuration at the moment, they've ended up with in configuration, they've added a new section called blog, and within that section, you got the page blog content settings, and on that settings page, you have that single setting. And my worry, I summarized it at the bottom. My main concern about the new group here was twofold. For one, the new group blog is created with only a single page blog content settings in it, and that single page has only a single interface component, a checkbox standalone blog content on it. On the other hand, I think we should be mindful about the number of categories, groups available, as well as what types there are. The majority is currently organized by topic, general functions. Not many are based on an actual entity type module. Media for one, but that contains not only pages for the media module, but also anything related to images and files in general. So that was my concern, and I thought it would make sense to at least discuss it up front. In general, from my perspective, the function itself
Ralph,
is good. Yep.
I'd like to interrupt you at this point. I pasted a link in the chat to a standard Drupal site with the Umami profile. So can you open that up and log in?
Best chat. Yep.
And I just like to remind people what happens in current Drupal, what the current behavior is. So just go edit some block, for example. And what is the URL, by the way? It's admin content block 1.
Admin content block, and yeah, 1.
And currently admin content block 1 is the edit page. So that's the current behavior. And I think if you change the URL and make it admin content block 1/edit, I think you get the same thing.
On here?
Yeah.
/edit.
I guess I'm wrong. But anyway, so currently the standard path, the default path for a block is the edit page for that block. And I just want to remind people that's the current behavior. And so this issue is giving us an option to change that behavior. and actually show a preview of the block at that URL. And then presumably you edit the block at the URL that I thought would work.
Um, What shall I do? Edit again?
Um, I just want to see what the edit page is when you have the merge request applied. Okay, so the edit page is block one edit.
Yeah,
And the view tab gives you,
just block one. And I've posted the link to my local instance as well.
okay, thanks. Um, so any other questions about what this issue is doing? Go ahead, Aaron.
No, not a question. I was going to wait till we go into discussion. So,
Okay. So any questions what it's about? I kind of wonder whether this has to be or should be in Drupal core, but maybe that's not a usability question. And since the two people active on this issue are maintainers of the block content module, um, that's really their call to make. Um,
yeah, I think, um, I mean, media's already set a precedent for this being in core, so I think it'd be weird if we said, you know, if it was like this went into contrib. Um, in regards to the question, I think actually putting it under content authoring, in terms of that configuration page, might be a nice one for it. So if you go into configuration, there's a group called content authoring, which in there you'll find things like text formats and other things relating to the authoring of content. And although I'm mindful that there is future work going on to completely reorganize the navigation, so I'm not too concerned, to be fair, about where it ends up, because there's a good chance it'll move again. So yeah, but I think content authoring could be quite good because I thought there'd be more things in there, but I think there is more things when you have more modules installed. So um, add a P to the end of that URL, says Benji.
Yep, I saw that. 1 second. Apologies.
Oh, it's the the URL that you.
Yeah, I've pasted
sorry.
here. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And the other thing I'm observing is this. I'm a bit conflicted by this. That it opens the view is on the using the front end theme. Which on the one hand is it's nice if you intend this block to be placed on the front end theme. It gives you a nice preview. But on the other hand, we are still technically within the administration area, and I'm just this is, to be fair, it's following the pattern that media established, but again, I just feel it feels odd that you would see the front end theme when you're in the administration area. But I understand that generally speaking, blocks are meant to show using the front end theme, so I'm just wondering, like, I don't have an answer to that, but it's something that I'm observing. So
I guess one way to address that would be to keep admin content block one as the edit page and then to have a new path, maybe just leave off the admin /content/block/1 as the view page.
yeah, and I wonder if that like breaks breadcrumbing, and that probably doesn't work with local tasks because they're all very path dependent, I think. Oh no, they're not path dependent, they're dependent, so maybe that might work actually. Um, I guess, Ralph, could we see how media does this as an example, actually? Do you have a media item?
No, not yet. 1 second. Oh, yeah, I have to media settings on URL. That has to be activated first. Yeah, it does just media and one.
Yeah. And that did used to be the case for blocks, but we content blocks, but we did change that. And
No, here is admin content block 1.
yeah, I'm saying that the path for blocks, it used to just be block/1, for instance.
Yeah. Okay. Oh,
Until
1.
Drupal 10.1, I think.
Yeah, when we reorganized the block stuff, we moved it was partly to help with breadcrumbs. And that was part of it was again because like the blocks never had like unlike media, they didn't until right now they didn't have what we're seeing, they didn't have like a front end view you could go to. So now we have to reconcile that with what we did in the past.
Go ahead,
That's
Scott.
I have a useful suggestion, I guess, first. So on admin structure block content, of course, is the page where we just see the block types that are defined. This is a setting that sort of affects here, right? So we have block types. Normally, structure also has a settings tab too. So if this had sorry, what's the right phrase I'm looking for? Just like tabs at the top where you could get to this setting for the configuration. You could put the configuration here. That would be one suggestion, just to say, like, I think the content authoring group makes sense too, but just to point this out as a group. Because it's also normal that entities would have a setting as well. This would be a place to put that setting. It's not a setting that changes often. I just want to talk about media. Media, I understand the point of media having individual published items. It's very normal for projects to want to have put up a media item and like it's a page, but it's not a page, just some place to download or view. But that's not normal for blocks, right? Right. So this is a weird use case that we're saying here, show the block for a content editor. I guess how does that help? Yeah, how does that help people is the question, I guess. If they can see an individual block, what does that provide on a public page?
I guess to answer that, I see this as being like the ability to preview something before you place it on the page. So say you created a content block and you just want to see how this looks because maybe you've added an image in there or something.
Yeah, but then we get into view modes really quickly. Like this could have a view mode, it would be inserted into something else would be triggered, right? The use case gets really complex quick there. If it's not actually themed, then you just have a block with a bunch of fields on it that are getting displayed.
Yeah, I mean, and that comes back to my point of like, well, what if this block was intended to be placed in the admin theme and you want to see how it looks in the admin theme?
What if the block is a component block and there's no other fields, right? I know that's just a question. Yeah, my suggestion to be useful is to put a settings on this page and put the config for that here. And then that's sort of a better place for people to at least know that they're setting up a new function for custom blocks to do something a little more unusual.
Okay, there are a couple of comments in the chat. Simo asks, how does this work for headless?
Actually, when I looked at the settings, I think, yeah, for headless, obviously you would just not have that checkbox on. So it's kind of a configuration issue because it's just would be useless. So it doesn't really matter there. But yeah, my later idea was, well, like when I checked how it works, I find it a bit not so good, a bit frustrating to have that redirect from that block/1 address to have it redirect to edit. So it's kind of it doesn't feel right. I don't know, but if there are that kind of redirections in other places. So if the option is not on in the configuration, so from entering that block/1, it redirects to edit. So it kind of for me, it was kind of quite a long flash, probably because of that site, but it's kind of if you edit the URL and take away the part edit.
Can we see if media does the same thing?
There you get a page not found.
Yeah, so that's inconsistency.
Yeah, so on the one hand, you could argue that we should be consistent with the media and therefore we shouldn't redirect. But on the other hand, you could argue that it's better to redirect because if you saved this path in the past, and I can see why media doesn't do it, because what you don't want is like an anonymous user being redirected to an access denied page to like an internal admin path. Again, because I think media is a slightly different use case than blocks, so maybe it doesn't have to be totally parity here.
Yeah, and Quinn also brought up consistency. The other comment that I wanted to read is the content pieces need to be consistent across the site. So blocks, media, and content should all have a view tab. Yeah, we're certainly moving in the direction of making that more consistent where originally nodes or content had view and edit tabs, but media and blocks didn't. And then we added the option for media to have the view tab or the standalone media URL. And then this issue is adding the same thing for blocks. So this is certainly moving in the direction of consistency, but as Aaron points out, or I guess what Simo pointed it out, this redirect thing is inconsistent. And I wonder whether that should be considered a usability issue.
Right, because as a user, I can see that in the GUI it's similar edit view. When you click on the URL, you will go to the view, but when you click on edit button, you will go to edit page. But the content library is different than the media library and the blocks library. So I thought it's easier for user to see the consistency.
So here's a question. Suppose the site is configured to provide the page at add in content block 1 or maybe just block 1, whatever it is. and then and anonymous users are allowed to visit those pages because that's the decision the site builder made. But then the site builder changes their mind and turns it off. What do we want to happen in that case? That an anonymous user goes to the link, which maybe there's a bookmark or it's in an email or something, or browser history. Do we want to get a 404 that there's nothing to see here? Or do we want to get redirected to the edit page and then get a 403?
We could maybe test it right now because I feel it's like blocks were never designed to be viewed independently. They're designed to be placed within something. So I don't think there's like a separate view permission in that sense. Maybe there is. Actually, not sure. But Ralph, if you turn on the standalone URL and
Yeah.
then in a private window, if you just like open private window and go to the path, and for viewing it, and let's see what happens.
For just viewing,
Yeah.
1 second. Access denied.
Okay, so it's using the edit access then, because you're staying on that page, you're not getting redirected.
Yeah.
I think that personally, I think that's okay. Like we're not exposing anything that the user otherwise wouldn't have been able to find.
For one point, the URL and the path is including the admin. If you would make it consistent with, for example, media, then the view page would be cleandef.site/blog/1. And then I'm not sure if access denied would be the right pick. In the context of admin, yes. That way, not sure.
Go ahead, Scott.
Make the theme selection an option 2 so that it defaults to admin theme but lets them pick the public theme as the follow-up. Because that's what we're doing, right? We're saying this is it. It's an administration view of the block content, but perhaps you want to see it in your public theme.
Is there any other situation where we let them choose the theme for preview?
No.
No.
But we
Um,
do have that in reverse for allowing to use front-end theme for editing. So it's kind of a
Yeah.
exists in reverse.
Down here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was thinking actually something along those lines, and I was thinking if we did that, it then opens up the possibility for that setting to also move to be on its own kind of page under configuration for probably under content authoring, for content. Oh, I don't like. Oh, now we're getting back into Drupalisms and the word content and what it means in different scenarios, and yeah.
Don't go there. Stay away.
Yeah, yeah. That node module is a real pickle.
Let's stay focused on the current scope. Here's a suggestion. This would be a step away from consistency, but should it be a setting that applies to all block types, or should we allow it for individual block types?
Oof.
And as I said, it's a step away from consistency, but if it is a good idea, then we could make the media consistent with it and also provide an option per media type.
And then also, sorry, I'm going to do it again, but then also move that option out of the theme settings into the content type settings, which actually almost makes more sense. But again, I'm saying that in the interest of consistency. And I think for media, that makes a lot of sense because, you know, you might want, as Ralph said, you might have an example where you want to link people to a document, but you don't want them going directly to an image, you know? But then just to further complicate that, in core, we don't actually have separate permissions for viewing bundles. For editing or deleting, yes, but generally speaking, there's a single for the entity type view permission.
Right. So if we had bundle level options or block type level options, then we wouldn't need the permission. There just wouldn't be a URL for certain block types, and there would be a URL for other block types. And we would have a single permission for viewing all of those that do have their standalone URLs.
Right.
Yeah, another advantage is that this would sidestep the issue of where to put the configuration in the admin menu, because it would just be one of the edit settings for the block type.
Yeah.
Which I think, Scott, is that what you were suggesting earlier?
I think so, yeah. It's the structure of the entity, not the configuration of the site.
And I with that, I like your idea, Scott, about being able to say, well, I want this to show with the admin or the front end theme. Because again, I think that's like, you might have certain block types which you specifically are designed to go in the admin theme and certain that are designed to go in the front end theme. But that's probably a follow-up issue, I would imagine.
Yeah, and if we do decide to make it configurable for each block type, then that follow-up issue can give the theme choice for each block type as well. So we'd on the page we're currently looking at, I guess we're not quite looking at this. Is Les, could you edit the basic block type again? Yeah, so we'd add options to this page saying create a standalone URL for the block, and then if that is enabled, you would have the additional option to use the front end theme or the admin theme. Go ahead, Ralph.
Just to go back to Scott's idea, should, in addition to on that edit page, on the block type level, on that edit page, the setting also be a local, is it local action on here on top of that, with a setting for basically setting a global for all block types, and those could be then overridden on an individual level in case someone wants something different on, for example, the basic block type? Or is that too complex?
Sounds too granular.
Okay.
Probably overcomplicated, because the basically what we're saying right now is, I think the default position, which is right now, it makes sense in most cases, is that you don't have this view page, but you might want that in certain cases, so you could enable it for certain block types. And just to touch on the point about selecting a theme, I think that makes a lot of sense as well, because, you know, quite another big use case for custom blocks is being able to place them in a theme region. And so you might have a block, you know, you might have multiple themes. Now I'm beginning to think the theme selection should actually be on the view page. So you could like dynamically select which theme, almost like we have with the block layout. You could So, for instance, Ralph, could you go to the
Use?
where is it? Appearance block layout, I think. Is that where it is?
You mean you mean okay,
Structure
I know
block
what you
layout,
mean.
yeah.
Structure and
One day it might be under appearance. That was something we wanted. So like here, how we have those tasks where you can switch between theme for your configuring. I wonder if for blocks, for the view path, if in a follow-up issue should be to add a local task for each theme. So you can then just choose which theme to preview the block in, because you then might be placing this, if you have multiple front-end themes, you might want to see how this renders in all of those front-end themes. I could see that being a use case there.
Yeah, I'm not sure that multiple front-end themes is a common enough use case that it would be in core. And I also see that Simo mentions the rabbit hole module, which also adds its options to the page we were looking at a minute ago, the edit page for the entity type. I'm sorry, for the bundle type. So yeah, and of course, the only special thing about core modules is that they are in core. But in most ways, core modules work the same as contrib modules. And yes, there is a mechanism that lets a module add its settings to this page. And the core block content module, I guess block content is adding this page in the first place, and other pages are modifying it. But I guess if we decided that the whole thing should be a contrib module rather than a core module, it would be able to add settings to this page. Simo, is there anything else you wanted to say about what rabbit hole does or how it's relevant?
Yeah, so it's if there is need for configuring some content to so that it shows different kinds of error message, or if it shows the content or something like that. So it's more fine-grained. So I think you can do it also per entity. So yeah, so just for note that there is a module that handles how other content handles the direct URL.
Oh, I see. That's your point. So yes, that's true. If I decide there are certain block types that have confidential information and should only be viewable by admins, then I have the option of installing the rabbit hole module, and it gives me that level of control. Good point. Ralph, I think you had your hand up first.
No, it's I haven't lowered it. Was from
Okay.
before. Sorry.
Scott?
My thought is about having tabs, themes and tabs for the selection of the theme. View mode displays kind of touches in the same thing item. There's a module called view mode displays, right? And it lets you select the view mode that you're previewing in a tab, which is the next sort of aligned thing. Like if we're talking about picking a theme, then you're also following it up with what view mode you want to see it in. So unless it's going to, unless it actually offers both sets, it's kind of incomplete.
Okay, and then I guess my question would be is whether choosing the theme could be done in a contrib module, and if so, should it be done in a contrib module? Go ahead, Thomas.
I'm curious what the motivation was for them to add it to core. Was that visible in the issue at all? So rather than just make that kind of decision by fiat, it shouldn't be in core. Did they have a motivation, or was it accidental?
Yeah, the issue
So
summary
maybe
is kind of sparse.
Yep.
given that, maybe rather than decide that they should do that, we should ask the question, what is their motivation for putting it in core rather than contrib? And that getting that conversation started would help us tease out pros and cons.
For example, so if there's already a contrib module that does something like this, let's have a look at the page for that module. It has a full release. It is used by 1,100 sites. If this were something that lots of people wanted, you would think that more people would be using the contrib module.
Fair point. Though I've always found that blocks are very powerful, but they kind of confuse the less advanced users. So I'm wondering if it's not widely used because people haven't even thought they need it's one of those unknown needs.
It's one of those things that you want as soon as you know it's available, but might not occur to you.
Right. And all that said, if this already exists in Contrib and the purpose of the code that they've written is to put it in core, what we're really saying is kill this issue. You've already got what you need in essence.
Right. But as I said at the start, I'm not sure whether that's a usability question. So I don't know whether it's, part of our input to decide that. And maybe I guess we can bring it up as a question, but not make a recommendation on it. Go ahead, Scott.
Is this the confusion because people are building layouts, building pages with layouts and have blocks, but then say, I want to work on this block. So I want to edit this block and it's going to be used in a page layout. Is that where that separation is? Maybe? Like somebody's like a site using layouts versus just a simpler Drupal site where they may just have some custom blocks they're placing into some sidebar regions.
I've seen use cases.
Yeah, it's a good question. I guess you can't really see it until you save the layout, right?
Mhm.
Go ahead, Thomas.
In my experience, there are sites that kind of push the boundaries of what you do with blocks, and the ones that really kind of make a bazillion blocks that are content, like they use it almost like nodes. And again, I don't know if this is a valid reason, but I've seen people do really crazy things and getting more parity with under other bundle types. Um, I could see some people wanting it, but I haven't seen it in wide use. Like I haven't seen blo- like block usage is very, very, very diverse. Like I've seen about as many different ways of people using blocks as you can kind of think of using blocks.
Yes, yeah. Context module as well, right?
Yeah.
That's still a thing.
Yeah,
I use the
that's still a
context
thing. I
module
still
Drupal
I have projects
6.7.
with context in it still, right now.
Okay. All right, so we're 2/3 of the way through the meeting. What are we going to recommend? We're going to raise as a question, but not make a recommendation. Raise as a question whether this should be in core at all, or whether it should be whether we should continue to have it in contrib. Second, is it worth bringing up the suggestion that we make it configurable per block type rather than one setting for all block types? I get a thumbs up from Scott and from Simo. Okay, so let's bring that up, and from Thomas. Let's bring that. Should we actually make it a recommendation then? I'm not seeing any thumbs up, except I am seeing one from Simo. All right, let's just bring it up as a suggestion, not a recommendation.
Suggestion for a follow-up.
Okay.
Or within the issue.
Although, as a follow-up, do we really want to introduce the option on its own brand new settings page and then have a follow-up issue that removes that settings page and moves it
True.
to type settings? Then do we want to look at the copy, the microcopy on the settings page? Standalone media URL, standalone block content URL. Should we be using title case rather than, or I guess we are using title case. Should we be using sentence case? In other words, should we be making block content all lowercase? That would be more consistent with the label on the media page. And I guess for the sake of the recording, I'll read out. On the media settings page, we currently have the checkbox labeled standalone media URL, and standalone is capitalized, URL is all caps. Currently on the block content settings introduced by this issue, we have the checkbox labeled standalone block content URL, and block and content are capitalized as a standard first letter, and URL is all caps. So I think for consistency, we should make block content all lowercase. Agree, disagree? Thumbs up from Quinn and from Thomas. Thumbs up from Simo and Scott. Okay. And then the other text on the existing media page is allow users to access media items at /media/ID. And the new text is allow users to access content blocks at /admin/content/block/ID. So that's consistent. And then what about the URL? Oh, I'm sorry, I have some comments in the chat that I've missed. Simo says for the description, to access content blocks, edit is a type of access, probably should say view, and that it changes default URL behavior. So for consistency, we would stick with access. I can see an argument for saying allow users to view content blocks and then maybe have a follow-up issue to make the media settings consistent with that. Go ahead, Scott.
What it's saying is wrong. It doesn't allow users to access block content. It allows authorized users to. We don't release block content to unauthorized users at all, right?
I'm not sure.
Right, an unauthorized user goes to this page, they just get a 404.
At the moment, you get access denied.
But likewise, you went to admin/content or admin/content/black one. That would be also denied, right?
Yeah, 1 second.
Yeah, I get access denied
Yeah, so the message
when I
isn't
try to open it.
we're showing, it says that every user can just get that. It's an admin user can still have this access.
And I'm checking on my Umami site.
And also, wasn't it so that if the checkbox is not checked for media, then the URL gives page not found and not edit media edit page. So that's also something that it's page not found or access to the media. It's not edit page or view page. So there's like with the block content.
So I guess that's related to the question I was going to ask next, which is what URL should we use? So the media module, if I enable the standalone URL, anonymous users can see it by default. There might be a permission there. But that's sort of to be expected because the URL is /media/1, whereas for blocks, the URL is /admin/content/block/1. Go ahead, Thomas.
You mostly hit on what I was going to say, but I feel that there's a fundamental question of how we want to allow site builders to manage the access to these things. So by putting the view block behind admin, we've made the decision that, and it's not, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but there's a tacit decision being made that users will never go directly to a block to view it. Whereas media, it makes sense. So I keep on thinking, I've got a regular website, I have a view, I list 10 pieces of media, and I want people to be able to go to a URL that is /media, like if they clicked on, look at this image, it goes to a page that's /media/ my.jpg. So I'm wondering, do we want to allow that same pattern with blocks, or have we decided that blocks there's no use case where we want to let site builders decide to do that with blocks? Because content typically isn't behind admin.
Right, so permissions and the URL path, these are tied together, and maybe we should consider use cases and who should have access, and that should determine the URL structure. Go ahead, Aaron.
Thanks. I think we have to be clear what the use case for blocks is, and it's not to go directly to a block and view it. Like the use case of a block is to place it within something else. And it's important that we don't deviate from that, because it makes it then becomes confusing for people who are learning Drupal, for instance. Like, well, what's the difference between a block and media? And if we basically turn them into the same thing, it's like, well, why do we have them? Because at that point, it's like, well, you could create a block called image, put an image field on it, and then what's the difference between that and a piece of media, right? Other than the media library. My point is that, like, we don't want to stray too far away from the purpose of blocks here, and so I don't think there's a problem with like keeping it within the admin area and keeping the permissions, because it effectively the purpose here, I suppose, is to say this is so you can preview your block before you place it in. It's not like explicit. Maybe tab should actually be called preview, like actually rather, because we're not, when saying view implies that you could grant, because what you can't do here, like a view tab on a node or media, is actually implies that other people can go view this who aren't administrators. Like you can, you grant people the ability to view published content or published media. You can't do that with blocks. You can't grant people, because what's going on here is they're using it's using the edit permission. So you either have the ability to edit blocks, and by having that ability, you also have the ability to like preview. So maybe actually to avoid that confusion, this tab should be called like preview or something rather than view.
Okay, you got a thumbs up from Thomas while you were talking, and Ralph also commented that there's the same question, what's the difference between a block with 4 fields and a node with 4 fields? So yes, we should not blindly make things consistent. There are different use cases for blocks, media, and nodes and taxonomy, and there should be some differences between them, and maybe this access is one of them. Go ahead, Scott.
I blame vocabulary and fieldability. Terms, like, so this is what happened with terms, right? Terms became fieldable. People started putting fields on terms. Terms become their own thing. They want a view mode for them. They want lists of them. Blocks, media is the same. Next piece of that is it becomes something they want to publish on. It's fieldable. And then there's the ability to throw fields on it, right? Now block is going through that same thing where it's not just this one thing, but it's a fieldable thing, and we want the content everywhere. Just a rant. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, but maybe you're saying pretty much the same thing that I'm saying, that certain things should be consistent, but there should also be fundamental differences between the various entity types. Otherwise, why have more than one entity type? Go ahead, Thomas.
To kind of follow up on that, I think that what we want to do though is be explicit when we do that, sort of like Aaron's suggestion of having the word preview. And I don't know if that's the right way to be explicit. I'm not for or against it right now. I don't have an opinion. But what's hard is when you look at something and these look almost identical and there's no cue for the person enabling these things to understand why that is. Like, we have made a determination why we think these two things are different and why it belongs in admin. But I feel like there could be we could do something more. So just being deliberate when we make those choices to have deliberate inconsistencies. Let's use language or something that makes them visibly different beyond just the fact that they've got two different URLs.
Right. And so by bringing this up, by discussing it on the issue, I think we'll be taking a step in that direction.
Yes.
We only have 5 minutes left, so let's wrap up. Go ahead, Aaron.
So I was just gonna say one final thing. Now one straight of thought, and I'll keep it really brief. Why do we need an option to turn this on? If we're basically saying that this is the ability for an admin to preview the block, let's just have a preview tab. Let's make it in the admin theme. Because I've worked on a Drupal 7 site or organization where it's not blocks, but you can basically preview the thing you've just created in the admin theme. And it's great because you can kind of get a sense of the thing I put in here, does it work? Does it render correctly? Right? That's the use case for this. So let's not try and mold it to be consistent with something when it's clearly not the intention. Like, let's stick with what the intention is, I think, that's my summary, basically.
That's thinking outside the box a bit. Ralph?
I agree with Aaron, removing the option to either show or hide it, to remove that. But on the other hand, I still like the option to define on a per block type level that, for example, block type A is previewed in, for example, the default theme, while block type B is previewed in the admin theme.
Okay, but that could certainly be a follow-up
Yeah.
issue. Get a thumbs up from Aaron on that. Scott?
The one thing that we're missing for blocks that's different from media and vocabulary is publish. Right, so all of those things can be viewed and published and have an unpublished mode. This does not have a publish mode. Blocks are not publishable.
Really? Huh.
Mhm.
Yeah, I thought that sort of the workspaces initiative was pushing to make everything, I guess everything is revisionable.
Publish should be part of that as well.
Okay. And you're getting a
Right,
thumbs
like
up
the
from
same
Aaron.
thing in layouts. People want to like put a block in a layout but not have it shown yet, so they might want to schedule a publishing time for it. That's exactly the next line of what people
Okay.
actually.
So you're getting a thumbs up from Ralph. I think that's probably out of scope for the current issue, but we could certainly mention it as something for a follow-up issue. So to wrap up, we have just 2 minutes left. I think the main use case is as Aaron said, that blocks are not standalone. I think the main use case is with Layout Builder, as we brought up earlier. And currently there's no way to preview a block before saving the layout. And that being the case, these are viewable only by admin users, and that means that the URL is appropriate. It should stay under /admin. That means the permissions are appropriate. And then once we've decided the permissions are appropriate, Aaron's suggestion, I think, makes sense that we don't need the checkbox. We can just add the URL. And it will only be visible to users with permission to edit blocks, which I think is the current permission controlling it. Does that cover everything? Well, that
Yeah.
and changing the case.
Just to add, I mean, I think that's correct because, and I could say that because when we went to as an anonymous user, we didn't get the redirect. We got like the access denied on that route, which indicates it's part of the same permission that you have for editing. That's my logic there.
Right, and we'd simplify it. We wouldn't need that redirect, which I assume is an extra bit of work in the current merge request. Go ahead, Ralph.
And the case isn't necessary at all if that setting is removed.
True.
So basically, and the question why that should be in core or not is also isn't a question anymore based on your explanation right now. So basically the only recommendation is to remove the setting, make it on consistently across all block types, and maybe change the title of the local action to preview instead of view.
Yes.
And add 2 potential follow-up issues. One, the ability to set the theme it is previewed on for a block type, and adding the publishing option, like Scott suggested, as a suggestion for a follow-up issue. But aside
Sounds
that,
good to me.
Yeah.
Aaron, be quick.
Yeah, just real quick one thing. I think that right now, until we add that option, when previewing it should be in the admin theme, because it's I don't know about anyone else, but it feels very strange that you're in the admin area, but then you see the front end theme. So until we like actively add the option to say do you want to preview this in the front end theme, I think it should be in the admin theme. But that's realize
Get
we're
a,
out of time.
a thumbs up from
Yeah.
Scott. And a thumbs up from Thomas. Okay. And Ralph, you'll add the comment?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, thank you all. We'll do it again next week. Hope you can make it then too.
Happy Friday.
Happy
Thank
Friday.
you.
Thanks, everyone.
Enjoy
Have
the
a good
weekend.
weekend. Bye.
Bye.